going to ask Commissioner Flagg if you would lead us in invocation of the pledge. Everyone please stand.
Dear Lord, we're humble and grateful and blessed to join together with the leaders of our city, Lord, to discuss and deliberate on decisions to enhance the quality of living for us all. Lord, bless each and every one of us. Bless our citizens, Lord, those especially who participate to enhance the decisions that are being made each day. Bless our community and bless us all in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Let's salute our great nation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Hill.
Here.
Commissioner Brown. Here. Commissioner Campbell.
Present.
Commissioner Boyer.
Present.
Commissioner Norwood.
Here.
Commissioner Flagg.
Present.
And Mr. Sam Jeffries.
Present.
All in order.
Thank you. Has everyone had an opportunity to read the minutes, review the minutes of October 12th, December 14th, and January 11th?
So moved. Second.
Motion floor in a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to public comment. Public comment, speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. No action will be taken on the item. Is there anyone here for public comment? Seeing no one here for public comment, we'll close public comment. We'll move to the regular agenda. TIF request. The first request on item number 1 is a request for Palatka Main Street to enter into a memorandum of understanding, memorandum of agreement with the city of Palatka, the C.R.A. for refunding Operation Third Friday Street Park.
Give you an introduction if you like. I thought you were going to do some talking.
Yeah, I'll do a little bit for you. Jonathan Griffith, project manager. We've got Main Street with us here tonight, and as a result of some of the workshop discussions and after some discussions between Harris and myself in coordination for the Third Friday event, we thought it prudent to memorialize some of the things that the city and the C.R.A. do, as well as what Main Street does to put that event on. If you read the staff report, we are making a recommendation that the C.R.A., if they do decide to continue with Main Street in a funding partnership kind of relationship, consider a comprehensive agreement that would outline the responsibilities, annual funding amount, and reporting requirements. Harris, do you have anything to say?
Commissioners, Mayor, City Manager, Mr. Deputy. The memorandum, it's pretty much ditto to everything that Jonathan Griffith said. The memorandum is supposed to formalize the operation and what happens to put on Third Friday the city's obligations, the Main Street's obligations. However, staff recommendation to go with a more comprehensive approach is prudent, and maybe we should wait till we come up with that more comprehensive approach and go from that point. So either way, I'm supportive of what we're here, the staff recommendation, and also hope that this goes forward. So, thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
is it PMS, MPS, or MSP?
PMS.
Okay, I mean, it's listed that many different ways on here, so that's why I'm asking. Just want to make sure that on the memorandum page, it's got MPS. And I know it could be Palatka Main Street, it could be Main Street Program, MSP, and all of those, so that's why I was wondering which one actually are you going to use, since we have them in all those different forms there.
It says Main Street Program, and then it's got MPS, so that's what he's talking about there and then throughout the document.
Then on the next
First,
page,
And on the next page, it's got
MPS.
PMS on the next page, so.
I'm not quite sure what we're looking at.
The acronyms
Acronym.
are listed several different ways, so.
Let's use PMS for consistency purposes, or let's use Main Street.
Yeah, Main Street. What's this use MS?
I mean, I just know it's multiple ways, and I think at some point in time, and the same thing is it a memorandum of understanding? Is a memorandum of agreement? Because it's listed both ways as well, so that when staff does work on an agreement there, and then also I would like to know we'll be the ones that's working on it. I think the city manager certainly needs to be a part of whatever the committee is that's pulling this together.
Any other questions or concerns relating to the memorandum of agreement?
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
I understand the idea of funding groups, but, and I think I had said this when I served on this board previously, we have no policy on what we as a C.R.A. will fund or not fund. And so I'm a member of 3 other groups that actually are in this district. So may those groups come and ask for their activities to be fully funded, and any funds they raise, they keep. I mean, if we're going to do this, I think we need some kind of policy in order so that we have something to go by. The second point is, how do we measure with accountability the results of those activities since we're funding those? You know, is it effective? Is it not effective? How do we as a board do that? And I'm looking at that not just with this group, but with any group that we would choose, or any activity that we would choose to fund. We've never had that. We did loan or not loan Blue Crab, 45, 50,000, more than that, I think. And we got back a little bit, but we didn't get back a little bit, or a lot. And we had no mechanism to understand if that was effective, not effective. And we have a lot of other groups that would come knocking on our door if it was available, and they knew it was available.
Any responses?
Well, I think one of the things that needs to happen is we need to determine, C.R.A., what are we going to, how does these overall groups fit within these overall C.R.A. Plan? And also, in developing a budget as well, we need to understand what the C.R.A. will fund and will not fund. That's what I agree. Anybody at any time can come and ask for funding. But if we don't have some type of policy or what have you in place to determine whether or not we do fund or do not fund, then I think we kind of leave ourselves open and we start setting precedents, as we move along.
Sure, I can do that. I was just mentioning to the mayor here, I think to answer Mr. Deputy's, one of his concerns is the difference being is we can certainly entertain requests from any other organization. That would be you folks' decision to do that. But the difference is today, what we're discussing is a long-term relationship that the city of Palatka, the elected commissioners in Palatka Main Street, if that's the name we're going by, has had the long-term relationship. So, and that's one of the things I would certainly think you would consider here tonight.
Well, I think while this is being addressed, the timing is certainly appropriate, Mr. Chairman, that so that people don't have false hope as to whether or not it is even necessary to apply. Right. If the memorandum of agreement is one thing, a request for funding is certainly, a different situation. But I think that in a different mechanism, whatever the policy is, whether or not it would be a C.R.A. issue or a Main Street issue as it relates to the funding, I think that it has to be pretty much spelled out on the front side so that the floodgates are not open, and then now you're put in a position of cherry picking who's funded and who's not.
Right. I think the other thing that goes along with this is when we talk about timing, where we are as far as strategic planning and coming up with an overall scheme. This memorandum, in essence, is probably a few steps too soon in the process, because we're still laying out kind of the dynamics of what we're trying to do moving forward. We understand that we have the authority to continue on with the 3rd Street, with the 3rd Saturday events. However, we still haven't put all the pieces to this puzzle in place as it relates to where we're going as far as administration is concerned. as far as what the, as far as what's the contribution gonna be, if in fact there's a salary, all those variables aren't in place. And I think that it's good to have this dialogue now, but it seems to be a bit premature, I think, in some regards. I think the reason it's bare bones and kind of simplified is because we have those other variables that are coming up to get an additional amendment or an additional working document at some point, depending on what the contemplation is. But again, I think that there can be more teeth put in this. And so that's kind of the thought.
Mr. Chairman, I think that perhaps what I'm hearing is that you could start out with a memorandum of understanding indicating that there will be a relationship between them, and then let that memorandum of understanding be the foundation that will lead to a memorandum of agreement that will have more of the specific details as to dealing with funding issues, and specifically the third Friday street party may not be the only issue that you're going to deal with as far as funding is concerned. So even the memorandum of agreement may be too specific and limit in the future whatever issues that the C.R.A. may feel is a good thing to partner on.
Well, I also think that the second phase of that is the accountability. I like what Mr. Jones said when he said, if it doesn't benefit business downtown, what are we doing? And I think that we need a standard to put everything up against. If it doesn't benefit business, then what is the purpose of it as to it relates to the revitalization? Because that's a key component to our revitalization, is to help businesses survive in this location.
I think the standards are in place when you look at the plan. The problem is, again, the plays aren't necessarily executed to its fullest so that we can actually measure. And I think that's the other part of, we've got parameters as far as what we can do to get funding. And I think we just have not gone the extra mile of making sure that there is that level of accountability that you're speaking of on certain projects, and that we can actually, that we sit down and measure each particular event to determine if it's money well spent.
I think the return on the investment, and the two words come to my mind is responsibility and accountability. And oftentimes, again, individuals are not always willing to come back and put it on the table so that we can measure. But if the parameters are not in place so that you're not measuring based on whether you liked the event or you didn't like the event, it's based on how effective it was and did it meet the criteria that was set forth on the front side. And I think that is going to be the key.
Anyone else?
I guess my only question is then, do we need to determine the criteria? It sounds like that's what we need.
I think we need to expand the criteria, because the criteria needs to be expanded and probably be a bit more explicit as it relates to exactly what it is that we desire. And that's part of the strategic planning process, I think, overall. And so I think that's the next phase, Mr. Holmes.
From a legal perspective, all I wanted to mention is that there's a thin line between a memorandum of understanding and a memorandum of agreement, and I'm not even sure if I know what that line is. With what you have in front of you, there are definitely certain obligations being undertaken by each side, and I just want the board to sort of take that into account in entering into one of these, and that we hope there's never an issue of enforceability, but if there was one, as I said, there's not a lot of difference between this and it is an agreement of sorts. I mean, it's an agreement by a different name. So the only thing I would suggest is that if you enter into one of these, and I'm not saying whether you do or you don't, but there really ought to be a paragraph in here that indicates that the understanding can be modified, amended, or basically set aside upon basically notice by either side, whatever notice you think is appropriate, so that this isn't something that you end up dealing with after maybe it's no longer relevant or appropriate. So that's all I would say.
Mayor, can I say something? The next thing we have on the agenda is the organization, what we want to do with C.R.A. If we make some changes and put other people on this board or change this board around, would you want to wait until they got here so that you could have some input from them? Because if we set this board up a little differently, then it may be some things that we don't realize from the people that are there every day. And I'd like to make sure that we don't put the cart before the horse, that we are really getting the input we need to do that with.
Well, I think ultimately the decision is gonna fall back in the same place. Whether we do it now or do it later. It'll come as a recommendation as opposed to us sitting here now and making a decision. So we can put it off, but it's still gonna be the same thing.
Yeah, but we might have some different ideas from a different viewpoint. We have other people involved.
But when we're talking about the relationship, because that relationship still includes the city.
Mayor,
And so it's gonna be,
you're exactly right. In the end, the commission will have the decision rights to say yes or no. Let's go back and change some things in order to make it more palatable to what we're trying to accomplish.
because the agency's gonna make the recommendation to the commission, and the commission ultimately has to make that decision. So while we're going through that fact-finding mission, I don't necessarily think that we need to pass that on or push that off to someone else as it relates to this particular portion of the conversation.
I'm not saying push it off to somebody else. I'm just saying that we might have a wider scope of viewpoints of the people. If I build a house and I put a kitchen in, I had this trouble when we built my house. The guy tells me, you don't need that many plugs for your utilities in there. I beg your pardon. I cook in this kitchen. I know what I need. And I was thinking with us that if we set up a committee that's diverse enough and that have something in businesses and people that live down there, businesses, Main Street, all of them come together, somebody may have something that really can help us to make it really better. But I know things can be done, it doesn't matter.
Any other comments?
What is the timing on this whole thing? I mean, when does this have to be done? If it can be put off, or does it need to be voted on today? What will we lose if we waited? If we waited, I don't know for a time certain, but if we voted now and say, okay, we'll approve it as a skeleton, and then it could be modified later. I think we need to look at both options in terms of what we gain now from just going ahead and approving this skeleton deal, and if we waited, what would we gain? We need to look at it from that
I
perspective.
don't think any of the language would, if we're looking at it to go ahead and get the ball rolling, it's kind of essentially doing the same thing that you're talking about, because it would always be on the table and always be a revolving thing until we get to a point that we all are satisfied.
You can't build a house without a foundation. You gotta have a foundation if you're gonna build a house. And if the foundation isn't solid, then the house is gonna crumble. And so there has to be defined marching orders as we start to deal with certain things. I'll let Ms. Dietrich go ahead and comment. She had a speaker's card filled out.
Actually came up for something else, but due to this conversation, it makes me, I understand through the chair to the mayor and the chair actually you're the chair on this board, right? Not the mayor. To Mary Lawson Brown, I can appreciate what you're saying, but I think what I'm hearing is that, first of all, no document should ever be static, ever. Because the world changes, ideas change, needs change. So no matter what you decide at any given point, there should all be room for future flexibility and improvement. So, and I think that's what Commissioner Campbell, you were just talking about. So with that, what I did come up here to talk about is, Sam, you mentioned the fact of criteria. And every program, criteria can always be improved. Now, as far as the facade grant program that I wrote that was in the original plan, since then, subsequently, after all that work was done, several other programs were created. And I'm not totally privy to all the details of how those are working or haven't worked or whatever. But what we talked about, I think in our second and our first workshop, was the fact that performance measures are critical, and those will be included in the action plan that's going to be a part of the update, which actually goes that step further to real tangible measurements and metrics, so you know if at least 2 or 3 or 4 of these things aren't going to be impacted positively with the application, they don't get approved. They can't even move, that's the first filter. Your performance measures are the first filter. So if you can say jobs will go up and taxes will go up and occupancy of class A, B, or C office space will be filled, then now you get to go to the second tier, which is now how much are you asking for. I'm just using this as a go-by. But there's like, I mean, as simple as 5 to 10 points of performance measures that we are going to use for that. So I think that is necessary because you want to make sure that someone can say they're going to create jobs and they're going to say they're going to fill the space and they're going to say they're going to provide a service, but if they can't actually show that in their performance with their proposal, then they shouldn't be considered for funding because your funds are limited. So with that, thanks.
Amen.
Thank you. Any other comments? What's the pleasure of the board, of the agency, I'm sorry?
I'm still having an issue, and I just have to say it, as a business person, this event has moved to the riverfront, and I have an issue in the sense of who are we helping when we move something to the riverfront? When there's 10 blocks that it could be used at, and I know that each block has its disadvantages and it has its advantages, but if we're not in front of a business, then who are we helping? What are we doing? And one of the questions I would ask for the performance is, how are you going to do criteria to perform on something if you can't ask anybody, well, what did this benefit those of us that are down there? Did we just have a party and we had a good time? Hey, that's great. If that's what it is in itself, then that would be the criteria to judge against.
Not only that, if there are fundraising opportunities that are there, at what point in time does it become sustainable if it's a social gathering, and that's the intent of it, is to have a social gathering versus, being able to bring a different return on the investment.
Right, and I think, I agree with Mr. Deputy. I think at the point that we move traffic away from businesses, it's a concern. I think the complaint that we've heard overwhelmingly has been from businesses that were not in that 300 block. And the effects, the other side of it is when the events are taking place and how do they truly affect the businesses of the merchants. Just because it's more of a night event. Me and Mr. Burns Caleb actually had conversations about some adjustments that may be in place to kind of create different opportunities to attract different groups of citizens and consumers to the areas. But I do think it's a concern when we start to move further away from certain merchants, because we obviously can't have the event and at the magnitude that it is now and really be able to hone in on every business on the street in a very strong manner. But there has to be some more creative way to actually just go to the riverfront and do it. And so it's a concern of mine as well.
I think we ought to remember the goals that we're trying to accomplish here, and that's redevelop the Central Business District, the TIF. And I think if we look at that, I don't think that we can exclude the people that we're trying to help. I think the businesses downtown, I think Downtown Inc. ought to be involved in the decision-making process of what, and be a part of that, be a part of the decision-making process of Main Street, C.R.A. as well. I think that if we are going to help them, we've got to allow them to participate.
Mr. Chairman, I have a candid question.
Yes, sir.
Is there a divide between the downtown merchants and Palatka Main Street? And if so, what is it? And who's going to fix it? And if it can't be fixed, my thing is this: if all the players are not to the table when we're talking the same business district. Everybody can't play. Somebody need to decide to go ahead and leave the table and let's get some players, because on one team, we got to go to the same goal. And I'm adamant about that. And if there are issues that are there, put them on the table and let's get it right.
I think that relationship, Mr. Flagg, has gotten a lot better. And there's been a lot of work being done on that working relationship to see those two merge together.
What kind of timeline? I mean, 30 days, how long does it take to reconcile any differences that are there?
Well-
And my thing is this, I'm not willing to sit back and us play patty cake when we've got people that are not willing, or they have relationships that have been sour from yesteryear. Whatever needs to happen, somebody need to come to this table and tell us what time it is, because I'm not willing to put money out for fragmented situations.
I believe that has moved forward tremendously.
Okay.
And I do have to say this, previously, the driving force behind Main Street was the Main Street manager, who worked and answered directly to the city manager. So, as an independent group, DPI would not, we don't answer to the city manager by any means. No group that, or club or organization that any of us are in answer to the city manager unless it's a city group. So you had a natural divide at that point, because, the chamber doesn't answer to the city commission and vice versa. But there has been a lot of work happening since that point to get those two groups to work together, and I think the relationship is much better than it's ever been.
How much time do we need and how much time do we have to fix the relationship is what my question is, because if this has been going on for years, then to me, it's time for somebody to step up and say, let's do it.
Hi, Jerry Hanner, I'm the president of Main Street, 122 Hilty Lane, East Palatka. I just wanted to mention, and Sam, I'm sorry if Alex hasn't talked to you yet or not, but I've had several discussions with Alex, who is on your board, about your board and our executive board getting together to discuss this relationship.
Right, he mentioned that you talked on Friday.
Yeah.
And I haven't had a chance.
Yeah, he and I have had discussions prior to that, but I think that we're well on our way to putting together some kind of a working relationship. We do have to remember that we're both different types of